What if the voice inside your head, the one that never seems to sleep, the one that keeps you restless in the dark, is not really you at all? What if everything you've been chasing, every worry, every fear, every sleepless night, has been built on an illusion you were never meant to carry? Listen closely, because tonight we are not here to fight the darkness. We are here to understand it, to dissolve it, and finally to rest. There is a quiet truth that most people spend their entire lives running from, not because it is painful, but because it is too simple, too freeing. And in a world that thrives on complexity, simplicity can feel almost frightening. You have been taught to hold on to your thoughts, your identity, your struggles, as if they define you. But what if they don't? What if the very thing keeping you awake at night is the belief that you must control everything, that you must hold your life together with constant effort? Imagine for a moment a river flowing effortlessly, without hesitation, without fear of where it is going. It does not stop to question its direction. It does not resist the rocks in its path. It simply moves, guided by something greater than itself. And yet, here you are, lying awake, trying to control every outcome, trying to predict every tomorrow, trying to become something you believe you are not yet. But listen carefully. You are not separate from the flow of life. You are the river. You always have been. The reason sleep escapes you is not because your body has forgotten how to rest. It is because your mind refuses to let go. It clings to unfinished conversations, imagined futures, past regrets, spinning stories over and over again, as if thinking harder will somehow bring peace. But peace does not come from thinking. It comes from surrender. And surrender is not weakness. It is trust. There was once a man who spent years trying to fix his life. Every day he planned, worried, analyzed, convinced that if he could just solve everything, he would finally feel at ease. But the more he tried, the more anxious he became. One night, exhausted beyond measure, he simply gave up, not in defeat, but in acceptance. He whispered softly, "I cannot carry this anymore. God, I place it in your hands." And for the first time in years, he slept peacefully. That is the paradox of life. The moment you stop trying to control everything is the moment everything begins to fall into place. Faith is not about having all the answers. It is about trusting the one who does. It is about recognizing that you are not alone in this journey, that there is a divine rhythm moving through your life, even when you cannot see it. The stars above you do not struggle to shine. The earth does not struggle to turn, and your heart does not struggle to beat. So why should your life be any different? Perhaps tonight, instead of asking, "What will happen tomorrow?" you simply breathe and say, "I trust what is meant for me will find me, will find me." There is something deeply sacred about the night. It strips away the noise of the world, leaving you alone with your thoughts. But those thoughts, they are not always truthful. They are echoes of conditioning, of fear, of old beliefs that no longer serve you. And yet you listen to them as if they are your master. But you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them, the silent observer, the presence that remains unchanged no matter what passes through your mind. Thoughts come and go like clouds, but you are the sky. And the sky does not resist the clouds. It allows them to drift, to dissolve, to disappear. So tonight, allow your thoughts to come. Do not fight them. Do not chase them. Simply watch them, as if you are sitting by the edge of a quiet lake, observing ripples on the surface. The more you observe without attachment, the calmer the waters become. There is a divine stillness within you, a place untouched by worry, untouched by fear. It has always been there, waiting for you to return. But you have been looking for peace in the future, in outcomes, in control. And peace cannot be found there. Peace is here, in this breath, in this moment. The truth is, you were never meant to carry the weight of the entire world on your shoulders. That burden belongs to God. Your role is simply to live, to trust, to flow. And when you begin to understand this, something shifts within you. The tight grip you have on life begins to loosen. The constant tension begins to soften. And slowly, gently, the sleep begins to return, not as something you force, but as something you allow. Because sleep is an act of faith. It is the quiet declaration that says, for this moment, I let go. I trust that I am held even in the dark. So as you lie there tonight, feeling the weight of your thoughts, remember this. You do not need to solve your entire life before you can rest. You do not need to have everything figured out. You only need to trust that what is unfolding is part of a greater design. And even if you cannot see the path ahead, even if your heart feels heavy, even if your mind continues to wander, know this, you are exactly where you need to be. Nothing is missing. Nothing is out of place. God is working. Even now, in ways you cannot yet understand. So breathe slowly, deeply, and let the night hold you. Let go. Just a little more, and trust just a little deeper. Because in that surrender, in that quiet trust, you will find not only sleep, but a peace that has been waiting for you all along. And as this moment gently fades into the next, remember, everything is unfolding exactly as it should, and you are safe in God's plan. And as that quiet trust begins to settle within you, like soft waves reaching the shore, something deeper starts to reveal itself. Not through effort, not through struggle, but through stillness. Because the truth you've been searching for has never been loud. It is always whispered, patiently, waiting for you to become quiet enough to hear it. You see, there is a habit within the human mind, a restless tendency to hold on, to cling to identity, to stories, to the idea of me as something separate, something fragile that must be protected at all costs. And so you build walls. You create expectations. You carry memories like heavy stones in your pockets. And then you wonder why you feel so tired, why peace feels so distant. But what if I told you the exhaustion you feel is not from life itself, but from resisting it? Think of a time when something didn't go the way you planned. Perhaps you replayed it over and over, thinking, it should have been different. I should have done more. I should have known better. And in that moment, you were not just experiencing the event, you were fighting reality itself. And that fight, that silent resistance, is what drains you. There was a woman who once carried the weight of a single mistake for years. Every night, as she lay in bed, her mind would return to that moment, reliving it, reshaping it, wishing she could undo it. She believed that by holding on to her regret, she was somehow honoring what had happened, that letting go would mean she didn't care. But one evening, in the quiet of her room, she realized something profound. The past was no longer real. It existed only in her mind. And by clinging to it, she was choosing to suffer again and again. So she whispered, through tears, God, I release what I cannot change. And in that simple surrender, something inside her softened. The chains she had carried for so long began to fall away. You see, forgiveness is not about changing the past. It is about freeing yourself from it. And this applies not only to others, but to yourself. So many nights are lost, not because of what others have done to you, but because of what you refuse to forgive within yourself. The harsh words, the missed chances, the choices you wish you could undo. But listen closely. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to grow. And growth requires mistakes. It requires falling and rising again with a deeper understanding. God does not ask you to be flawless. God asks you to trust even in your imperfection. There is a gentle mercy woven into the fabric of existence, a grace that allows you to begin again moment by moment. But you must be willing to step into it. You must be willing to release the illusion that you are defined by your past, because you are not your past. Just as a river does not hold on to the water that has already passed, you are not meant to hold on to what is already gone. Life is always moving, always renewing itself. And when you resist that flow, when you try to anchor yourself to what has already been, you create suffering. But when you let go, even just a little, you begin to feel lighter, freer. And perhaps tonight, that is enough. Not a complete transformation, not a sudden awakening, but a small, quiet decision to release one burden you've been carrying. Maybe it is a regret. Maybe it is a fear. Maybe it is a story you keep telling yourself about who you are or who you are not. Whatever it is, you can place it gently in God's hands and say, I no longer need to carry this alone. There is something deeply comforting about that realization that you are not the sole architect of your life, that there is a greater intelligence, a divine presence guiding you even when you feel lost. And sometimes the very things you resist the most are the things that lead you exactly where you need to be. You may not understand it now, and that's okay. Faith is not about understanding everything. It is about trusting even when you don't. There is a verse that echoes softly through the hearts of those who are weary, a reminder that you are never abandoned, never forgotten. It speaks of a peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that does not depend on circumstances but flows from something far deeper. And that peace is available to you now. Not tomorrow, not when everything is perfect, but here, in this very moment. As you lie there, listening to the quiet rhythm of your breath, notice how life continues without your effort. Your lungs rise and fall. Your heart beats steadily. Your body knows how to rest. If only you allow it. So allow it. Let go of the need to control every thought, every outcome, every possibility. Let them drift like leaves carry. By a gentle stream, you do not need to follow them. You do not need to solve them. You only need to be here. And in this presence, something sacred begins to unfold. A stillness, a quiet knowing that you are held, that you are guided, that you are exactly where you are meant to be. Even if it doesn't feel like it, even if your mind still whispers doubts, even if your mind still whispers doubts, even if your mind still whispers doubts, even if your heart still carries a little weight, trust that something greater is at work. Trust that every moment is shaping you gently, perfectly, into who you are becoming. And as your thoughts begin to slow, as your body begins to soften, as the night wraps around you like a comforting embrace, remember this: you are not behind in life. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are simply unfolding. You are simply, and in that unfolding, there is beauty, there is purpose, there is divine timing. So rest, not because everything is finished, but because you trust that it will be. Rest, knowing that what is meant for you cannot miss you. Rest knowing that God is already working on what you cannot yet see, and as sleep gently finds its way to you, like a quiet blessing, hold on to this simple truth. You are carried even when you let go. You are guided even in the dark. And you are deeply, unconditionally at peace within God's plan. And as that peace begins to deepen, like a soft tide pulling you gently inward, there comes a moment where something within you loosens its grip even further, not because you forced it, but because you are finally beginning to see that there was never anything to hold on to in the first place. All this time you have been trying to secure yourself in a world that is constantly changing. You've been searching for certainty in things that were never meant to stay the same. Relationships shift, circumstances evolve, seasons come and go, and yet the mind resists. It whispers. It whispers. Make it permanent, make it safe, make it last forever. But life does not work that way. And perhaps that is not a flaw. Perhaps that is the design. There was once a man who feared losing everything he loved. So he held on tightly to people, to possessions, to moments. He tried to preserve them, to freeze them in time. But the tighter he held, the more anxious he became. Because deep down he knew nothing could truly be held forever. And one day, exhausted by his own fear, he sat quietly and watched the sunset. For the first time, he did not try to capture it or prolong it. He simply watched as the colors faded into darkness. And in that fleeting moment, he felt something unexpected. Peace! Because he realized the beauty of the sunset was not in its permanence, but in its passing. And so it is with your life. The reason you suffer is not because things change, that because you wish they wouldn't. You want joy without loss, love without vulnerability, life without uncertainty. But to live fully is to embrace the entire dance, not just the parts that feel comfortable. Even now, as you lie there in the quiet, notice how each breath comes and goes. You do not cling to the breath that has passed, nor do you fear the one that has not yet arrived. You trust the rhythm without even thinking about it. So why not trust life in the same way? Faith is not clinging to outcomes, it is surrendering to the flow. There is a divine intelligence moving through everything, an unseen harmony that connects all things. And when you begin to trust that harmony, something within you begins to relax. The need to control fades, the fear of the unknown softens, and you begin to move with life instead of against it. But this does not mean you will never feel fear again. It does not mean you will never face uncertainty or pain. It means that even in those moments, you remembered. That you are not alone. There is a presence, quiet, constant, watching over you. Call it God, call it the universe, call it the source of all things. It does not matter what name you give it. What matters is that you trust it. There was a time when you did not question life so much. As a child, you moved freely, laughed easily, slept deeply. You did not lie awake, worrying about tomorrow or replaying yesterday. You trusted without even knowing the word for it, and that trust still lives within you. It has not disappeared. It has only been covered by layers of fear, expectation, and conditioning. But tonight, as you gently peel those layers away, even just a little, you begin to reconnect with that original innocence, that quiet knowing that everything is okay. Even now, everything is okay. Even now, Everything is okay, not because your life is perfect, but because you are held within something far greater than your understanding. A divine presence that sees the whole picture, while you only see fragments. And isn't it exhausting trying to piece together a puzzle when you cannot see the full image? So perhaps you don't need to solve it tonight. Perhaps you can simply trust that the pieces are coming together exactly as they should. There is a story of a farmer who one day lost his horse. His neighbors came and said, "This is terrible." But the farmer simply replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned, bringing with it several wild horses. The neighbors said, "This is wonderful." And again the farmer replied, "Maybe." Later, his son tried to tame one of the wild horses and broke his leg. "This is terrible," they said. "Maybe," the farmer responded. Soon after, soldiers came to take young men to war, but his son was spared because of his injury. You see, what seems like misfortune today may reveal itself as a blessing tomorrow, and what feels like a blessing now may carry unseen challenges. But life is not asking you to judge every moment. It is asking you to trust it, and that trust is where peace lies. As your body begins to grow heavier, as your thoughts become softer, notice how the urgency to figure everything out begins to fade. You are not being asked to solve your entire life tonight. You are being invited to rest within it, to rest in the mystery, to rest in the unknown, to rest in the gentle understanding that you do not need to control the future, because the future is already being shaped by something far wiser than your fears. For something far wiser than your fears. And in that realization, there is a quiet kind of freedom. A freedom that does not depend on circumstances. A freedom that does not require answers. A freedom that simply says, "I trust." So let your mind slow down like a fading echo in the distance. Let your body sink deeper into stillness. Let the night carry you effortlessly into rest, because you are not separate from life. You are life, unfolding, breathing, moving exactly as it was meant to. And even in the moments when you feel uncertain, even when the path ahead is unclear, remember this gentle truth. Nothing that is meant for you will ever be lost. Nothing that is meant to find you will ever miss you. So release the need to chase, to force, to hold on. And instead, allow yourself to be carried by the quiet, steady flow of God's plan. Because in that surrender, there is peace. In that trust, there is rest. And in that stillness, you will find yourself gently drifting into a sleep that heals, restores, and reminds you that you are always exactly where you need to be. And as you drift even deeper, 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 now, as the edges of your thoughts begin to blur, there is one final illusion that gently asks to be released. The illusion that you are separate, that you are alone, that somehow you must walk this path by yourself. But listen very carefully. You have never been alone, not for a single moment. Even in your darkest nights, even in the sour amps, when your heart felt heavy and your mind refused to rest, there was a quiet presence beside you. Not loud, not demanding, but steady, patient, unwavering. A presence that did not judge your fears, did not rush your healing, but simply remained waiting for you to notice. And perhaps tonight, you are beginning to feel it. Not as a thought, but as a gentle stillness within your chest, a softness in your breath, a calm that doesn't need a reason to exist. This is what you've been searching for. Not answers, not control, not certainty, but connection. There was once a traveler who spent his entire life searching for meaning. He crossed oceans, climbed mountains, studied under great teachers, hoping that somewhere someone would give him the answer that would finally quiet his restless heart. But no matter where he went, the same unease followed him. Until one evening, exhausted and alone, he sat beneath a vast open sky. There were no distractions, no voices, no expectations, just silence. And in that silence, something shifted. He stopped searching. He stopped asking. He simply was. And in that moment, he realized what he had been seeking was never out there. It had always been within him, quietly waiting, beneath all the noise, all the striving, all the effort. You see, the peace you long for is not something you need to earn. It is not something you achieve after everything in your life is perfectly arranged. It is already here beneath the surface of your thoughts, beneath the layers of fear and doubt. But to feel it, you must be willing to let go completely. Not just of your worries, but of the idea that you are separate from the very life you are living. Because you are not an outsider looking in. You are part of the whole. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean, you are not separate from the divine source that created you. The same force that moves the stars, that breathes life into the world, flows through you in every moment. And when you begin to trust that, truly trust it, something beautiful happens. The fear of the unknown begins to dissolve. The need to control begins to fade. And in its place, there is a quiet surrender, a deep, unshakable peace. Not because life has become predictable, but because you have realized you don't need it to be. Even now, as your body relaxes further, as your mind drifts like a feather in the night air, feel the gentle truth of this moment. You are safe. Not because nothing will ever go wrong, but because whatever comes, you will not face it alone. There is a wisdom guiding you, a love holding you, a presence walking with you through every uncertainty, every transition, every unseen tomorrow. And perhaps that is enough. You don't need to see the entire path. You don't need to understand every twist and turn. You only need to trust the next step and then the next. There is a quiet beauty in not knowing, a sacred mystery in allowing life to unfold without resistance. And when you embrace that mystery, when you stop trying to force clarity, you begin to rest in something far deeper than certainty. You begin to rest in faith. Faith that what is meant to be will be. Faith that even your struggles carry meaning. Faith that every delay, every detour, every unexpected turn is part of a greater unfolding you cannot yet fully see. And in that faith there is a softness, a gentleness that carries you effortlessly towards sleep. Let your thoughts fade now, like distant whispers dissolving into silence. Let your body sink, heavier, deeper, supported by the quiet embrace of the night. Let your breath guide you, slow, steady, calm. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to fix, nothing you need to figure out. Just be here, in this moment, held, guided, at peace. And if a thought arises, let it pass. And if a thought arises, let it pass. If a worry returns, gently release it. If your mind tries to pull you back into control, softly remind yourself, I trust. Because you do. Even if only a small part of you feels it, that is enough. That small seed of trust is all that is needed for peace to grow. and as sleep begins to take you, like a gentle tide pulling you into stillness. Carry this quiet knowing with you. You are not separate from life. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. You are part of something infinite, something loving, something divine. And in that truth, there is nothing to fear, only rest, only peace, only the quiet, sacred unfolding of a life that is being guided perfectly by hands far greater than your own. So let go completely now and drift gently into the deep healing stillness that has been waiting for you all along. And now, as everything you've heard gently settles into the quiet spaces of your heart, there is no need to hold on to every word, no need to remember every thought, because the truth is, what truly matters has already reached you, not through your mind, but through your being. All along, through every reflection, every story, every soft unraveling of illusion, you have been guided back to one simple, eternal truth. You are held, held, held in moments of confusion, held in moments of doubt, held even when you forget, even when you drift, even when you feel far away from peace. There has always been something greater carrying you, something patient, something loving, something divine. And perhaps now you can feel it more clearly, not as an idea, but as a quiet presence, wrapping around you like a gentle embrace. All the striving, all the overthinking, all the nights spent trying to solve life before allowing yourself to rest, they begin to fade now, because you are beginning to understand. You were never meant to carry it all alone. You were meant to trust that every unanswered question has its time, to trust that every delay has its purpose, to trust that even the parts of your life that feel uncertain are being shaped by a wisdom far beyond what you can see, and in that trust there is a peace so deep, so steady that nothing can truly disturb it. This is the peace that does not depend on outcomes. This is the peace that remains even in the unknown. This is the peace of surrender, the peace of faith, the peace of knowing that God's plan is always unfolding, even when you cannot yet understand it. So, as you rest now, as your body softens completely, as your mind drifts into stillness, let this be your quiet prayer, not spoken loudly, but felt gently within. God, I release what I cannot control. I trust what I cannot see. I surrender what I have been holding too tightly. And I rest, knowing you are guiding me. Let those words sink into you like a calm river flowing through your soul, washing away the weight you no longer need to carry. You don't have to chase peace anymore. You don't have to force sleep. You don't have to become anything other than what you already are in this moment, because in this moment, you are enough. In this moment, you are safe. In this moment, you are exactly where you are meant to be. And as the night gently carries you deeper into rest, into healing, into stillness, hold on to this final truth. Nothing that is meant for you will ever pass you by. Nothing that is meant to find you will ever be lost. And everything in your life is unfolding with a quiet, perfect purpose, guided by the loving hands of God. So sleep now peacefully, and trust that when you awaken, you will rise not just rested, but renewed, held, and gently guided forward, one step at a time, exactly as it was always meant to be.
When a man starts to wake up, he naturally pulls away from the crowd. Not because he hates people, but because the usual way of connecting stops making sense. Most conversations revolve around status, gossip, or complaints. And once he begins to see through that, it gets harder to engage. He's not bitter. He's not isolating himself out of pride. He's just stopped chasing what others are still chasing. He starts to notice the performance in everyday interaction, the need to be liked, to belong, to say the right thing. And without making a big deal about it, he quietly steps back. People might still wave. They might still offer small talk. But the connection is no longer there, because it was never real to begin with. He didn't cut ties, he didn't burn bridges. He simply stopped pretending. And when he does that, distance happens on its own. This is the beginning of solitude, not loneliness, just space between who he used to be and who he's becoming. He starts to see clearly what holds people together isn't real. It's not depth. It's not truth. It's habit, comfort, and shared illusions. People bond over complaining about their jobs, over chasing status, over defending ideas they've never truly questioned. He used to do the same. He used to think that was connection. But now it feels more like noise. He notices how often people speak, just to avoid silence. How much energy goes into keeping up appearances. The constant need for validation, for agreement, for reassurance. And once he no longer needs those things himself, he sees how dependent others are on them. How relationships often survive not because of honesty, but because everyone agrees to keep the story going. He understands why people hold on to what feels familiar. He still cares. He still listens, but he no longer plays along. That shift, subtle as it is, creates distance all on its own. From the outside, he might seem the same. He still shows up. He's still polite. He hasn't disappeared completely. But something fundamental has shifted, and the people around him can feel it, even if they can't name it. They sense that he's no longer trying to impress anyone, that he's not looking for approval, that he's not playing the social game anymore. Some find it admirable, others find it unsettling, because he's no longer easy to read, because he's not performing for anyone. He doesn't flatter, doesn't compete, doesn't entertain, and that makes him hard to place. People might say he's distant, or too quiet, or that he's changed. What they really mean is, he no longer fits into the roles they've grown used to. They liked him better when he reflected their values. Now, he reflects something else, something still, grounded, and not dependent on being liked. People see him, but they don't really know him, because knowing him now would require them to see what he sees, and most people aren't ready for that. He once believed that staying connected meant staying involved, showing up, participating in conversations, maintaining appearances. But with time, that definition changed. As his priorities shifted inward, he stopped engaging out of obligation, not because he cared less, but because he no longer needed others to affirm his place in the world. He still values connection, but not if it depends on constant engagement, emotional performance, or subtle negotiation for approval. He doesn't withdraw out of resentment. He simply no longer finds value in maintaining relationships built on pretense or expectation. To those accustomed to transactional connection, his presence can feel distant. But in truth, he's simply not playing the same role anymore. He no longer speaks just to keep the peace. He no longer sees himself through other people's eyes. What emerges in that space is not loneliness, but clarity. A calm independence that allows him to remain rooted even when others come and go. He's become honest, and from that honesty, a deeper kind of freedom begins to take shape. From the outside, solitude is often misunderstood. To most people, being alone signals a lack of friends, of purpose, of belonging. But for a man who has begun to see clearly, solitude becomes something else entirely. He no longer fills his time with distractions, just to avoid being alone with himself. He no longer seeks out constant company, to escape discomfort. He's learned to sit in silence without needing it to end. What others describe as loneliness is often just unfamiliar stillness. They equate the absence of noise with emptiness. He's realized that most of what fills a typical day, talks, tasks, and duties, is just noise pretending to be important. In solitude, he sees himself without distortion. There's no one to impress, no image to maintain, and that clarity, while uncomfortable at first, becomes a source of strength. He doesn't avoid people, but he also no longer depends on them to feel complete. This shift usually confuses others. They assume he must be withdrawn, disconnected, or even arrogant. But in truth, he's simply content with his own presence. He has faced the silence most people run from and discovered it wasn't silence at all. It was peace. As he grows more inwardly stable, he becomes less predictable to others. Not by intent, but by the simple fact that he no longer participates in the subtle exchanges that define most social interaction. He does not mirror emotions to gain approval. He does not offer reassurance when it would mean denying what he sees. To those still dependent on external validation, this creates discomfort. They may interpret his neutrality as arrogance, his silence as judgment, his detachment as disinterest. In reality, he is none of those things. He's simply no longer invested in managing perception. Much of what people call connection is actually a performance, a mutual agreement to keep certain illusions intact. Once he steps outside that arrangement, he disrupts it just by being present. He doesn't argue or provoke or attempt to convert anyone to his view, but the absence of familiar signals, approval, flattery, emotional reinforcement, makes others uneasy. Many of his previous friendships begin to fade, not because of conflict, but because the foundation they stood on no longer holds. He begins to notice how often relationships are maintained through shared complaints, routine habits, or the mutual reinforcement of personal narratives. Once he no longer participates in those patterns, the connection weakens on its own. He no longer feels compelled to offer agreement for the sake of belonging. He no longer entertains conversations that avoid substance, and he has no interest in maintaining ties that require him to shrink himself. This shift is not a rejection of others. It's the result of a change in what he's willing to invest his energy in. True friendship becomes something quieter, simpler, and far more rare. It is no longer based on shared illusions, but on mutual recognition. Two people who don't need each other, yet choose to walk alongside one another without expectation. These kinds of connections cannot be manufactured. They emerge naturally, if at all, and only when both individuals have stopped seeking to be completed by the other. Most social interaction relies on unspoken rules. You validate my perspective, I'll validate yours. We won't go too deep. We won't challenge each other's assumptions. We'll pretend we agree, even if we don't. He used to play by those rules because everyone did. But once he starts operating outside of them, the dynamic begins to break down. He no longer gives comfort just to ease tension. He doesn't pretend to agree when he doesn't. He's done with the little acts that keep everyone else feeling safe, but keep him feeling false. This isn't defiance, it's clarity. And that clarity is disruptive because it exposes how much of everyday life is based on mutual avoidance of truth. People notice, even if they don't understand what's changed, they feel the shift. They sense that something familiar has gone missing. The constant exchange of comfort, validation, and distraction. And without him feeding the system weakens. Talks start to feel awkward. People stop reaching out as much. What used to feel warm and familiar now feels tense and uneasy. Not because he did something wrong, but because he stopped playing along. He hasn't rejected anyone. He simply stopped reinforcing a structure he no longer believes in. As his understanding deepens, something unexpected happens. He begins to need less, not just materially, but emotionally, socially, even intellectually. He no longer seeks recognition. He no longer relies on others to confirm what he already knows internally. And as that need dissolves, so do many of the relationships that once required it. This is the paradox. The clearer he becomes, the quieter his life becomes. Not because he's closed off, but because so much of what once filled his time was rooted in a search for external affirmation. Without that search, most social activity feels optional, if not unnecessary. He stops trying to be understood. He stops needing to explain. He no longer measures his presence by how much space he takes up in other people's lives. From the outside, this might look like withdrawal, but inside it's the opposite, a settling into something solid and real. He still values connection, but only when it emerges naturally, without demand or performance. He hasn't become cold. He is simply no longer dependent. And in that detachment, there's a kind of depth that can't be found through attachment. Once he wakes up, he can't unsee what he sees. He looks inward, and the noise quiets. He looks outward, and the world is still asleep. He sees the false certainty in people's eyes, the roles they perform, the beliefs they never question, the constant movement that masks an inner stillness they haven't touched. He no longer envies what others call connection, because he understands the cost it often demands: agreement, performance, conformity, and he won't trade truth for the comfort of fitting in. Still, there's a part of him that remembers, a part that quietly hopes, not for crowds, not for company, but for someone awake, someone who has seen what he's seen, felt what he's felt, someone who doesn't need him to be smaller, quieter, or more agreeable in order to feel safe. That kind of meeting is rare. It can't be forced, and he would rather wait in silence than pretend in conversation. So he walks alone, not because he enjoys being apart, but because in a world still dreaming, authenticity is more valuable than acceptance. At some point, the solitude stops feeling unusual. It becomes normal, not empty, just quiet. He no longer interprets distance as a problem to solve. He sees it for what it is: the natural result of no longer pretending. While others surround themselves with noise, he has learned to live in stillness. While many chase attention, he moves without asking to be seen. People often assume he must feel lonely, as if company, any company, is always better than walking alone. But they confuse isolation with absence. He is not absent. He is simply no longer performing. He has come to prefer the space that honesty creates over the closeness that illusion demands. This is the final shift. He doesn't need the world to wake up for him to feel whole. He doesn't need agreement to feel clear. And he doesn't need validation to know who he is. He walks alone, yes, but not as an outsider, as a man at peace with the cost of truth.
If you're hearing these words, it isn't by mistake. This moment found you exactly when it needed to, not a second too soon, not a moment too late. Life has a way of arranging such meetings when the noise begins to settle just enough for you to notice its whisper. Perhaps you were looking for something tonight, or perhaps you stumbled here without knowing why. But nothing truly stumbles. Everything arrives with a certain rhythm, like the wave that reaches the shore precisely when the tide decides it's time. We like to believe we choose what we see, what we listen to, what we pay attention to. Yet, sometimes it feels more truthful to say that life chooses for us that certain ideas, certain voices, certain moments seek us out when we're ready to hear them. So maybe you didn't find this. Maybe it found you. And if it did, it's because something inside you is ready to remember. Ready to remember that change is not the enemy, that growth does not have to come with struggle, and that even the smallest shifts can carry you toward a life you can finally breathe in. A lot can change for the good in 6 months, not through obsession or pressure, but through awareness, gentleness, and a willingness to cooperate with what already wants to unfold. 6 months. That's all it takes for the seasons to turn, for a tree to shed and grow anew, for the moon to circle the earth half a dozen times. 6 months is long enough for an old pattern to dissolve and a new rhythm to take root. Yet to the hurried mind, it sounds like an eternity. To the wise heart, it's only a breath. So let us begin not with a plan, but with a pause. Take one slow breath and feel how even this simple act carries you from the person you were a moment ago into someone slightly changed. Every inhale is arrival, every exhale, release. This is the entire secret of transformation written in the language of the body. Take in what nourishes, let go of what no longer serves, and trust the rhythm in between. The first teaching, then, is simple. Do not rush your becoming. You cannot bully the flower into blooming, nor scold the sun into rising faster. Life ripens at its own pace. What matters is not speed, but sincerity. When you give yourself completely to the moment you're in, time becomes an ally rather than a threat. The minutes are no longer something to beat, they are something to inhabit. You see, most people try to change their lives as though they were rearranging furniture, push this here, drag that there, throw out what you don't like. But the deeper kind of change begins in stillness. It starts when you stop treating yourself as a project to be fixed and start seeing yourself as a process to be understood. 6 months of honest observation, noticing your reactions, your habits, your hidden fears, will do more than 6 years of self-improvement performed out of guilt. The second teaching is awareness. Not the strained awareness of someone trying to meditate perfectly, but the soft kind, the awareness that simply notices. Notice when you tighten, notice when you breathe freely, notice what brings lightness to your chest and what contracts it. Awareness doesn't demand that you act immediately. It only asks that you see clearly. And clarity, all by itself, begins to move mountains. You might say, but noticing isn't enough. I need to do something. Yet the truth is, most of our doing springs from confusion. We act before we understand, and then we wonder why the results look the same. The power of awareness is that it lets right action emerge naturally, the way a path appears once the fog lifts. 6 months of honest noticing will reveal more direction than a lifetime of anxious decision-making. The third teaching is gentleness. Real growth is tender, not violent. The seed breaks open not because it is forced, but because the conditions invite it. So be gentle with your timing. You are unfolding exactly as you must. Gentleness is not laziness. It is intelligence, the intelligence of the universe that knows how to turn an acorn into an oak without rushing. When you replace self-criticism with curiosity, life begins to cooperate with you instead of resisting you. The next teaching is presence in the ordinary. Many people chase enlightenment as if it were hidden in some distant temple, when in truth it hides in the small things you overlook. The way sunlight falls on your hands, the sound of water running from the tap, the silence between two breaths. If you give yourself to these, even for a moment, you are already practicing awakening. 6 months of giving your full attention to the simple will make the complex take care of itself. Now, the mind will argue that such small things can't possibly change a life. It wants grand gestures, dramatic transformations, fireworks of self-reinvention. But think of the ocean. It shapes continents grain by grain. Think of music. It's nothing but waves of air, yet it can make you weep. The subtle is not weak, it is foundational. If you honor the subtle each day, you begin to live from the source instead of the surface. The fifth teaching is trust. Trust is the quiet confidence that the universe knows what it's doing, even when you do not. It is understanding that you are being shaped by forces wiser than your plans. Trust is not blind faith, it's intimate cooperation with reality. It's what happens when you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is this showing me?" In 6 months of living with that single shift in question, you would become unrecognizable not because life got easier, but because you stopped fighting what was already trying to help you grow. And of course, gratitude, the awareness of enough. Gratitude doesn't mean pretending that everything is perfect. It means noticing that perfection isn't required for beauty. The moment you begin to thank the small things, a clear sky, a kind word, the warmth of your own body, you step into abundance. For 6 months, practice this. Whenever you catch yourself complaining, pause, breathe, and name one thing that still supports you. You will find the complaint fades, and in its place, something steady arises, a kind of quiet contentment that doesn't depend on circumstance. Now, someone might say, "But I've tried all this before. I know these ideas." To which I would ask, do you know them, or have you simply heard them? To know a truth is to live it until it becomes the way you breathe. 6 months of living, even one of these truths, sincerely will teach you more than 100 inspirational quotes ever could. And so the invitation is simple. Do less, notice more. Stop demanding that life give you instant proof of progress. The proof is already there, in every breath, every sunrise, every gentle reminder that you are still here, still capable of renewal. You are not late, you are not behind. You are right on time, because time itself is your teacher, not your jailer. Let this next half year be your experiment in trust. Let it be the season in which you stop forcing and start listening. Watch what happens when you replace control with curiosity, tension with patience, judgment with awareness. The change will not announce itself with fanfare. One morning, you'll simply wake up and realize the heaviness you used to carry is gone. You didn't fix it. It simply melted when you stopped feeding it. And when that happens, you will smile, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally understand it never needed to be. You will see that the universe was never testing you, only teaching you to listen. And in that listening, the next 6 months and the rest of your life will take care of themselves. There comes a moment when awareness no longer feels like practice, but presence, when you stop trying to be mindful and simply are. It happens quietly, often without you noticing. You realize one day that the thoughts which once ruled you have softened, that the noise has lost its authority. You still think, you still plan, you still worry from time to time, but the thoughts no longer pull you by the collar. They pass through like weather over a mountain. The mountain does not resist the clouds. It allows them to drift by, knowing they cannot stay. This is what maturity of spirit feels like, not perfection, not constant peace, but a deep familiarity with change. You no longer fear every shift in mood, every season of uncertainty. You begin to see that everything, even confusion, has its place in the dance. 6 months of living this way, of greeting each day as a visitor rather than an obstacle, and you will notice the difference not in what happens to you, but in how you meet it. The great paradox of awakening is that it doesn't make you immune to life. It makes you more intimate with it. The rain still falls, the heart still aches, the losses still come, but suffering changes its texture. Pain is no longer an enemy to flee. It becomes a teacher to listen to. And the listening itself is the release. When you stop running from what hurts, you find that what hurts had something sacred to tell you all along. You begin to see that control was never the source of safety. Control is the mind's imitation of trust, an anxious attempt to replace faith with structure. But life cannot be caged. The more tightly you grip, the more it slips. Yet when you open your hands, everything falls gently into place. Not because you forced it, but because you finally stop disturbing the natural flow. You see, there is a wisdom at work beneath your plans, the same wisdom that turns caterpillars into butterflies, tides into moons, seeds into forests. That wisdom does not need your constant supervision. It only asks that you cooperate by not standing in the way. When you align with that intelligence through stillness, through honesty, through awareness, life begins to move through you effortlessly. You become the dancer who no longer counts the steps, but simply moves with the rhythm. This is what the ancient Taoists called Wu Wei, effortless action, doing without forcing. It does not mean passivity. It means the harmony between what you want and what the moment allows. To act in this way is to feel that life is not something happening to you, but something happening as you. The boundary between the doer and the deed dissolves. You are painting, but also being painted. You are breathing, but also being breathed. If, for 6 months, you practiced only this, the art of letting life breathe through you, you would begin to taste freedom, not as an idea, but as a lived reality. You would wake in the morning not with the weight of things to control, but with curiosity for how the day might unfold. The mind would still whisper its worries, but you would smile at them like an old friend who no longer needs to be believed. And in this space, something miraculous happens. Joy returns. Not the fleeting pleasure that depends on outcomes, but the quiet joy of existing. The kind of joy a child feels watching raindrops race down a window, or the kind that rises for no reason at all while walking alone. This joy is the natural fragrance of presence. It doesn't need an explanation. It is what remains when the noise of striving fades. You may ask, but what about ambition? What about goals? The awakened person doesn't lose direction. They simply stop mistaking the destination for the journey. There's nothing wrong with wanting success, or love, or peace, but you will suffer if you think they live somewhere in the future. All the joy you seek is hidden in how you walk toward them, not in their arrival. 6 months of walking mindfully toward what you love will change your relationship with desire itself. You will no longer chase, you will invite. This is the art of surrender, not giving up, but giving in. To surrender is to recognize that life knows more about life than you do. It is the humility to admit that the same intelligence that orchestrates galaxies might be trusted to handle your next chapter. When you surrender to that intelligence, you stop praying for things to go your way and start asking to see the way things are. That shift alone can dissolve a lifetime of tension, and so you begin to act from stillness instead of panic. You begin to speak from clarity instead of defense. You begin to love without needing to possess. What once felt like effort becomes grace. What once felt like a burden becomes a blessing in disguise. In that simplicity, 6 months can become a lifetime's worth of evolution. Now, there's another illusion worth letting go of, the illusion of progress as linear. You will not rise every day. Some days you'll fall. Some weeks you'll feel lost. But understand, a spiral moves both upward and inward. Growth revisits its lessons, but each time with more awareness. When you see old patterns return, don't call it failure, call it review. The universe is showing you what's left to integrate. 6 months of honoring even your setbacks as sacred will reshape how you see yourself. Instead of punishing your mistakes, you will learn from them like a patient gardener who studies why a flower didn't bloom, not with anger, but with curiosity. You will begin to see that every event, pleasant or painful, was another doorway to understanding. And that understanding, not achievement, is what makes a life fulfilled. Eventually, you will look back on these months and realize that what changed most was not your circumstances, but your relationship with them. The storm didn't stop. You learned how to dance in the rain. The noise of the world didn't quiet. You discovered the silence beneath it. The future didn't become certain. You made peace with uncertainty itself. That peace is freedom, not escape from life, but intimacy with it. And then, at last, the mind relaxes. It no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. You see that life was never asking you to win, but to awaken, to participate, to witness the miracle of being conscious, even for a brief moment, in this endless unfolding of the cosmos. What could possibly be missing from that? So, if these words have found you, let them remind you of something you already know deep down. You are not late, you are not broken, you are not behind. You are precisely where the river needs you to be. The current has carried you here, not to test you, but to teach you how to flow. The coming 6 months will pass, whether you worry or not, whether you struggle or trust. But if you choose trust, if you choose awareness, gentleness, gratitude, then those same 6 months can become the softest revolution of your life. And when the time comes to look back, you will smile, not because everything went according to plan, but because you finally learned to dance with the plan of everything. And in that smile, life will smile back. When life feels too heavy, it is not because the world has changed. It is because we have been carrying things that were never meant to be carried in the first place. There is a quiet burden that sits on the shoulders of so many of us, and it is not always obvious at first. We think it is the work we must do, the deadlines we must meet, the expectations we cannot escape. We think it is the people around us, the constant noise, the opinions that swirl through our lives. But the heaviest weight is often invisible. It is the weight we give to our own thoughts, to our own judgments, to the relentless pressure we place upon ourselves to be someone we think we ought to be. It is exhausting, and it can leave us feeling isolated, as though no one understands how heavy the air feels, how difficult it is to rise each day and face the responsibilities that pile upon us. It is important to notice these feelings, to allow yourself to recognize them. Many people try to push them aside or convince themselves that they are weak if they cannot bear the strain. They distract themselves with busy work, with noise, with small victories that never quite reach the heart of the problem. The burden remains because it is not about the tasks, it is about the way we relate to life itself. We try to control it, to shape it, to bend it to our will, and when life refuses to cooperate, we feel frustration, despair, and a sense of futility. You might think that if you could just be stronger or more disciplined or more capable, that the weight would lift, but it does not. Strength is not the answer in the way we have been taught to believe. Strength is not about holding on more tightly or pushing harder. Strength is about seeing clearly and learning when to release, when to let go, when to stop trying to carry what is not yours to carry. There is a curious paradox in life that so many of us miss. We think that life is a problem to solve when it is not. We think that the right way to live is to struggle against the current when the current is not our enemy. It is a river flowing, and we are swimming within it. When we resist, we exhaust ourselves. When we allow ourselves to move with it, even in small ways, we discover a rhythm, a subtle intelligence that exists beyond the effort of our minds. This does not mean giving up or abandoning responsibility. It means recognizing that there is a natural order to things, and that sometimes our attempts to force outcomes create more suffering than the circumstances themselves. Take a moment to remember a time when you were overwhelmed, and yet something shifted without your effort. Perhaps it was the sun breaking through a cloudy morning, the voice of a friend, speaking a simple truth, or even a moment of silence that allowed your mind to rest. In those brief instants, there is a hint of what it feels like to release the weight. It is not about removing all challenges, but about changing the way we encounter them. Life can be demanding, but we do not have to meet it with endless resistance. There is a choice in how we respond, a space to breathe, a pause between what happens and how we react. In that space, the weight loses its oppressive quality, and we discover that we have always been capable of moving through difficulty more lightly than we imagined. Most of us fear that if we let go, we will fall. We are taught to think that holding on tightly is the measure of care, of dedication, of love. Yet the opposite is true in so many ways. There is freedom in releasing the compulsion to control. There is clarity in seeing things as they are, not as we wish them to be. Our minds are often filled with stories of what should have been, who should have done what, how the world ought to operate, and in believing these stories, we carry unnecessary burdens. Step back and observe them. Notice the tension in your body, the contraction in your chest, the tightness in your jaw. These are signals that you are carrying weight that is not inherent in the moment. Awareness alone begins to lighten the load, because to be conscious of the burden is to no longer be trapped by it. Consider the way a tree stands through a storm. The branches bend with the wind. The trunk sways without breaking. The tree does not fight the storm, but moves with it. We humans often imagine that resilience requires rigidity, that we must remain unyielding. Yet, true resilience is the capacity to bend without fracturing, to adapt without losing one's essence. There is elegance in this approach to life, an ease that comes from understanding that we do not need to dominate every circumstance. We only need to meet it with awareness, with presence, with a gentle attention that honors both the challenge and our capacity to endure. It can be helpful to imagine setting down invisible bags that we carry, one by one, acknowledging the contents of each and asking yourself if it is yours to carry. Guilt that is inherited responsibility for outcomes that were never under your control, and expectations placed upon you by others often weigh heavily. Recognize them and allow them to exist without clinging. Let them settle around you like leaves in a stream. They are part of the landscape, but they do not need to become your weight. In this simple act, we begin to glimpse the possibility of living with a lighter heart and a more spacious mind. There is also a need to consider the flow of time. Many of us live as though the past is a burden we must bear indefinitely. We replay mistakes over and over in our minds. We imagine regrets as anchors that hold us down. Yet the past is unchangeable, and what matters is the present moment, the space in which we can act, choose, and move. To carry yesterday with us as if it defines who we are only increases the pressure. Let go of the stories you tell yourself about failure and loss. They are part of life, but they are not the sum of your being. Your life is happening now, and even amidst heaviness, there are moments of relief that are accessible if you allow yourself to notice them. Even the body carries weight in ways that mirror the mind. Shoulders tight, stomach knotted, chest contracted, jaw clenched. These tensions are signals not just of stress, but of the refusal to let life move naturally. Practices of gentle awareness, of noticing breath, of stretching without force, can serve as reminders that the body is capable of releasing as the mind is capable of surrendering. Each exhale becomes a small letting go, each pause in thought a subtle relief. The process does not need to be dramatic, it does not need to be complete. Small movements, small recognitions accumulate into a profound transformation over time. There is a universality to this experience. Everyone at some point feels overwhelmed by existence, by the responsibilities of life, by the weight of expectations. The realization that life itself is not against us, but is instead a flow we inhabit, can bring a deep sense of comfort. You are not weak for feeling tired. You are not failing for struggling. The heaviness is a signal, an invitation to awaken to the possibility of a different relationship with life, a more spacious and forgiving one. Look at the people around you and you will see the same subtle burdens reflected in posture, in speech, in quiet sighs. We are all learning how to navigate a world that often asks too much while offering so little clarity in return. To carry this understanding with compassion toward yourself and others is a powerful act. It reminds you that you are human and that the shared experience of life is both heavy and luminous, both difficult and extraordinary. Allow yourself to feel this truth fully. There is no shame in recognizing heaviness. There is no failure in admitting that you cannot carry everything. Awareness alone begins to dissolve the illusion that you must. When you pause to breathe, to observe, to release even slightly, you create space for life to move through you with less strain. It is in this movement that we find subtle joy even in hardship, relief even in challenge, and the possibility of connecting with life without the constant sense of struggle. The act of letting go does not mean abandoning life or responsibility. It means understanding the difference between what requires your presence and effort and what is simply the flow of existence around you. By discerning between these two, by gently releasing what is unnecessary, you cultivate freedom. Freedom is not the absence of difficulty, but the absence of needless resistance. It is the discovery that even amidst the weight, life can have moments of lightness that are tangible, real, and accessible. It is in these moments that we glimpse the deeper truth of living. We see that heaviness is not the end, that struggle is not a permanent state, that life is not something to be endured, but something to be experienced. And in this recognition, the heart softens, the mind relaxes, and the body unwinds. We become participants in life rather than captives of it. Every day offers small opportunities to practice this awareness. A walk in nature, listening deeply to a friend, noticing a sunset, or simply sitting with your breath. Each is a reminder that even if life feels heavy, we can meet it with presence. We can allow it to move through us rather than weigh upon us. Each small act of noticing, of breathing, of releasing, is a step toward living lightly, even in a world that often asks us to bear more than we can. Take a moment now to acknowledge the heaviness you feel. Observe it. Name it if you can. And then imagine it dissolving into the flow of life, not disappearing suddenly, but gently easing away. Notice how your posture shifts, how your chest opens slightly, how the mind feels a bit clearer. These small shifts are powerful. They remind you that heaviness is not a permanent identity. You are not the weight you carry. You are the awareness that notices it. This chapter has explored the subtle burdens we carry, the invisible pressures that weigh on us, and the ways awareness and surrender can begin to lighten the load. There is more to discover in this journey. In the next chapter, we will explore the deeper philosophical and spiritual dimensions of releasing heaviness and finding a profound sense of freedom and ease in life. Consider for a moment how much of your life is spent trying to control things that are inherently uncontrollable. We try to dictate the behavior of others, to predict outcomes, to prevent mistakes, to manage what is beyond our grasp. This is exhausting. The mind becomes a battlefield of endless strategizing, and the heart becomes tense with worry. Yet there is a remarkable shift when we recognize that life flows in ways we cannot fully anticipate. There is freedom in releasing the compulsion to force every outcome and in trusting that even within uncertainty there is a pattern, a rhythm, a subtle order that can guide us if we are attentive. The pressure of life often comes from comparing our journey to others. We measure our success, our worth, our progress against people who walk different paths with different circumstances. Comparison is a weight that is entirely optional. When we stop measuring ourselves against others and begin to observe our own path, we discover a deeper alignment with who we are. Our goals, our joys, our struggles become unique expressions of life, unfolding in its own way. We are not failing if we do not meet arbitrary standards. We are participating in the natural flow of our own existence. It is important to remember that heaviness is not a punishment. It is a signal. It is life inviting us to pause, to look more closely, to reconsider how we are moving through it. The pressure, the fatigue, the sense of being overwhelmed can all become teachers. If we meet them with curiosity rather than resistance, we begin to understand their purpose. They reveal what we value, what we fear, what we are clinging to, and what we can gently release. One way to practice this is through noticing the small sensations in the body. Life's heaviness often manifests physically as tension in the shoulders, a tightness in the chest, a constriction in the jaw. By turning attention toward these sensations and simply observing them without judgment, we create a pause. In that pause, the weight begins to shift. The mind begins to follow the body, and a small sense of ease emerges. It does not require heroic effort. It requires attention, presence, and a willingness to allow life to move through us rather than be blocked by us. Another dimension of releasing heaviness is understanding the nature of thought itself. Thoughts are not commands, they are phenomena. They arise and fade like clouds passing through the sky. We often mistake them for reality and cling to them as if they are the truth. This clinging creates tension. By noticing thoughts as transient and letting them pass without resistance, we free ourselves from the unnecessary weight they impose. Awareness of the mind's movement is the beginning of liberation. There is a simple metaphor that may help. Imagine a bird carrying a small stone in its claw. The bird flies, but the stone weighs it down. Now imagine the bird letting go of the stone. The bird does not stop flying. It does not fall. It soars with ease and grace. Life is much the same. The stones we clutch are often optional. Recognizing them and releasing them allows us to move more lightly, more freely, more joyfully through the currents of existence. It is also essential to consider our relationship with time. Many people carry the past as if it were a heavy load they cannot leave behind. Regret, guilt, and sorrow become anchors that impede movement. Similarly, fear of the future creates tension and anxiety. True ease emerges when we inhabit the present moment fully. The present is where life unfolds. It is where choice and action are possible. By dwelling in now, even briefly, we release the weight of what was and the worry of what might be. This does not mean forgetting lessons from the past or ignoring the future. It means engaging with them without attachment. We can learn from experience without being defined by it. We can plan for the future without being consumed by it. The heaviness of life is diminished when we distinguish between what is immediate and what is imagined. Presence is the key that unlocks relief. There is also a relational dimension to consider. Many of the weights we carry involve others, expectations, judgments, and attachments can burden us. By observing our relationships with compassion and honesty, we can release unnecessary strain. We do not need to fix others or conform to their desires. We can engage authentically without absorbing their weight as our own. Boundaries, when practiced with care, are not limitations but liberations. They allow us to move through life without accumulating needless pressure. Even in the midst of challenge, there is room for joy. The moments that surprise us, the laughter that bubbles unexpectedly, the beauty that reveals itself in ordinary life, all remind us that life is not entirely heavy. By learning to notice these moments, we cultivate a counterbalance to pressure. Joy does not cancel difficulty, but it softens it. It creates space between the weight and ourselves, and reminds us that existence has many dimensions, many rhythms, many textures. Spiritual insight deepens this understanding. In most philosophical traditions, the idea is the same life is not something to dominate, but something to participate in. There is a flow, an intelligence, a current that we are part of, whether we acknowledge it or not. Resistance creates struggle. Engagement without clinging creates freedom. When we recognize that we are not separate from life, that life is not an enemy to be conquered, the heaviness begins to dissolve. Presence, awareness, and acceptance become tools of liberation. Practice can take many forms. Meditation, mindful walking, listening deeply to another person, observing nature, or even simply breathing consciously, all remind us of this truth. The practices are not magic. They do not erase difficulty. They reveal our capacity to meet it differently. Each moment of noticing, each act of letting go, accumulates into profound change. Over time, the constant background weight of life diminishes, and we discover a quieter, lighter, more spacious way of being. It is helpful to remember that heaviness is not a personal failing. Everyone experiences it. Everyone at times feels overwhelmed. By observing this universality, we connect with others and with ourselves. Compassion for ourselves and for the shared human experience softens tension. It is a gentle reminder that difficulty is part of life, that it is not a reflection of inadequacy, and that release is always possible. The process of lightening life's weight is continuous. It requires patience, kindness, and persistence. Small moments matter. Pauses in thought, moments of attention to breath, brief acknowledgements of sensation and feeling, noticing joy and beauty, practicing presence in everyday tasks, observing the impermanence of thoughts and emotions, and engaging with life without rigid attachment, all of these contribute. The river flows, and we learn to move with it rather than against it. As we conclude this reflection, know that life's heaviness is not permanent. It is a condition that invites awareness, presence, and release. The pressures, the fears, the burdens, all serve as teachers if we meet them consciously. Step into the flow, observe the weight without clinging, breathe deeply, allow life to move through you. And in doing so, discover the subtle freedom, the gentle ease, and the profound lightness that is always available when we stop resisting and start participating. Even as you face responsibilities and challenges, even as you feel the pull of expectations and pressures, remember this: you are not the weight you carry. You are the awareness that notices it. And awareness has the capacity to release, to soften, to lighten, and to move through life with grace. This is not a promise of a perfect life. Life will remain complex and sometimes difficult, but it is a promise of freedom from unnecessary struggle and a reminder that even when life feels too heavy, it is possible to experience relief, clarity, and presence. Take a moment now to breathe, to notice, and to feel the difference that small awareness brings. You are not alone in this. Everyone navigates the currents of life, and in noticing the weight, releasing what is optional, and engaging fully with the present, we participate in life rather than being crushed by it. There is no final destination. There is only the journey and the manner in which we move through it. Let it be lighter, let it be conscious, let it be present, and let it be deeply, profoundly your own.
You know, one of the most peculiar and yet most inevitable experiences on the path of awakening is the discovery that you are changing in ways that others around you are not. And this creates a very strange predicament. It's rather like what happens when a caterpillar begins to transform into a butterfly while still surrounded by caterpillars who are quite content to remain caterpillars. Now, I want to talk about this because it's something that almost everyone who begins to wake up will encounter. And it can be one of the most isolating, confusing, and yes, dangerous experiences you'll face. Not dangerous in the sense that you'll come to physical harm necessarily, though that has happened throughout history. But dangerous in the sense that you may lose everything that once gave you a sense of belonging, identity, and security. Let me begin by saying that growth is not comfortable. It never has been, and it never will be. When a lobster outgrows its shell, it must shed that shell and expose itself, soft and vulnerable, until a new shell forms. During that time, it is in grave danger. Every predator in the ocean would love to make a meal of a soft-shelled lobster. But if the lobster refuses to shed its shell, if it clings to the safety of what it knows, it cannot grow. It will remain stunted, confined, unable to realize its full potential. Human beings are much the same way. We outgrow our shells, our beliefs, our relationships, our ways of understanding the world. And when we do, we become vulnerable. We lose the protection of the crowd, the comfort of conformity, the security of being like everyone else. And this vulnerability, this exposure, is what I mean by danger. Now, what does it mean to outgrow those around you? It doesn't mean that you've become superior, or that you're better than they are. This is a trap that many people fall into, and it's a sign that they haven't really grown at all. They've simply traded one form of ego inflation for another. No, outgrowing others means that you've begun to see things that they don't see yet, that you've asked questions they haven't asked, that you've stepped out of the agreed-upon framework of reality while they remain comfortably within it. Perhaps you've begun to question the values that everyone takes for granted. The pursuit of wealth, status, security, the accumulation of possessions, the endless distractions and entertainments that fill up our lives. Perhaps you've begun to see that these things don't lead to happiness, that they're empty promises, that they're symptoms of a deeper malaise, a fundamental misunderstanding about what life is and what we are. Or perhaps you've had experiences through meditation, through contemplation, through crisis, through psychedelics, through some spontaneous opening that have shown you that reality is far more mysterious, far more fluid, far more consciousness dependent than the solid, objective, external world that everyone believes in. You've seen through the illusion of the separate self, or at least caught a glimpse behind the curtain, and now you can't unsee it. When this happens, you find yourself in a very odd position. You're living in two worlds simultaneously. There's the conventional world, the world of commerce and politics and daily routine, the world where everyone is playing their roles and taking it all very seriously. And then there's this other dimension, this deeper reality, that's always present but that most people are completely oblivious to. And you must learn to navigate both worlds. You must learn to speak two languages, the language of the marketplace and the language of the mystic. You must learn to be in the world but not of it, as the old saying goes. And this is extraordinarily difficult because the two worlds have different rules, different values, different ways of making sense of experience. The people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, they're still operating entirely within the conventional framework. They're concerned with their careers, their mortgages, their social standing, their plans for the future. And these concerns, which once seemed so important to you, now seem rather trivial, rather beside the point. Not because you've become callous or indifferent, but because you've seen that there are deeper questions, more fundamental issues at stake. But you can't simply tell them this. You can't sit down with your family at dinner and say, I've realized that the self is an illusion and that we're all manifestations of one universal consciousness. They'll look at you as if you've lost your mind. And in a sense, you've lost the conventional mind, the socially conditioned mind, and you haven't yet fully articulated what you found in its place. So you remain silent, or you speak in hints and suggestions, or you try to find people who understand what you're going through. And this is where the isolation begins. Because the people you've known all your life, the the people you love and care about, increasingly seem to be living in a different reality than you are. You're speaking different languages, pursuing different goals, seeing the world through entirely different lenses, and they sense this, even if they can't articulate it. They sense that you're no longer quite one of them, that you've changed in some fundamental way, that you're not playing the game with the same enthusiasm you once had. And this makes them uncomfortable. It threatens them. Because if you can step outside the agreed-upon framework, then maybe the framework isn't as solid as they thought. Maybe their own lives are built on sand. They may respond in various ways. Some will try to pull you back, to normalize you, to get you to be the way you used to be. You've changed, they'll say, and it won't be a compliment. They'll accuse you of becoming strange, impractical, irresponsible, self-absorbed. They'll remind you of your duties, your obligations, your place in the social order. They'll do everything they can to squeeze you back into the box you've outgrown. Others will simply distance themselves from you. They'll find you boring or preachy or incomprehensible. The conversations that once flowed easily now feel forced and superficial. You have less and less in common. The friendship or relationship gradually withers, not through any dramatic break, but through a slow, sad drifting apart. Still others may become hostile. This is particularly true if you've outgrown a religious or ideological framework that they're still invested in. If you were raised in a particular faith and you've moved beyond it, if you've questioned the dogmas and found them wanting, your very existence becomes a threat to those who still believe. You're a heretic, an apostate, a lost soul who must be saved or shunned. This is the danger I'm speaking of. Not that you'll be physically harmed necessarily, though that can happen, but that you'll lose your community, your tribe, your sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. Human beings are social creatures. We need connection. We need to feel that we're part of a group, that we're understood and accepted. And when you outgrow those around you, you risk losing all of that. Now, you might say, well, why not just keep quiet about it? Why not simply maintain the facade, play along, keep your insights to yourself? And many people do exactly this. They live double lives. They maintain the conventional appearance while privately knowing that it's all a game, all a performance. And there's a certain wisdom in this approach. As I said earlier, you don't shake someone awake from a pleasant dream unless the house is on fire. But there are problems with this strategy as well. First, it's exhausting. Living a double life, constantly monitoring what you say, editing your thoughts, pretending to care about things that no longer matter to you, this takes a tremendous toll. You become alienated from yourself, split, fragmented. The very integration and wholeness you've been seeking through your spiritual growth becomes impossible because you're constantly betraying your own truth. Second, it's inauthentic. And authenticity, being true to what you've discovered, is essential to the spiritual path. If you've seen something true, something real, and you hide it, deny it, refuse to live by it, then what was the point of seeing it in the first place? You become like someone who's discovered a treasure but is too afraid to spend it, so they bury it in the ground and continue to live in poverty. Third, and perhaps most importantly, your very presence. Even if you say nothing, communicate something. People pick up on energy, on vibration, on the unspoken. If you've genuinely transformed, if you've genuinely outgrown the conventional framework, it will show in 1,000 subtle ways in the quality of your attention, in your responses to crisis and difficulty, in what you laugh at, in what you take seriously, in the way you move through the world. So you're faced with a dilemma. You can't go back, you can't unsee what you've seen, unknow what you've known. But you can't fully go forward either. At least not without consequences, without losses, without a period of profound loneliness and disorientation. This is what the mystics have always called the dark night of the soul. It's the passage between the old life and the new, the death of the caterpillar before the emergence of the butterfly. And it's dark precisely because you've left behind the familiar landmarks, the comfortable certainties, but you haven't yet arrived at the new dispensation. You're in between, in limbo, in the wilderness. During this time, you may feel utterly alone. You may wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. if you've thrown away everything valuable for some nebulous spiritual fantasy. You may long for the days when life was simpler, when you fit in, when you didn't question everything, when you could just go along with the program like everyone else. But here's what you must understand. This loneliness, this sense of isolation, is not a sign that you've gone wrong. It's a sign that you're going right. It's an inevitable stage in the process of transformation. Every hero in every myth must leave the village, must venture into the unknown, must face dragons and demons alone before they can return with the treasure. The treasure, in this case, is your authentic self, your true nature, freed from the conditioning and programming of society. But you cannot claim this treasure while still clinging to the approval and acceptance of those who represent that very conditioning. You must be willing to stand alone, to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to be rejected. Now, I want to be very clear about something. This doesn't mean you should go out of your way to alienate people, or that you should be arrogant or superior, or that you should reject everyone who doesn't share your level of understanding. That would be spiritual egoism, and it's just another trap, another form of separation. What it means is that you accept the consequences of your growth with grace and compassion. You understand that people are where they are, and they're doing the best they can with the level of consciousness they have. You don't judge them or look down on them. You simply recognize that you're on different paths, at least for now. And you trust that if you're meant to have community, if you're meant to have companions on the journey, they will appear. Because here's the wonderful thing. When you outgrow one level, when you shed one shell, you don't remain alone forever. You find others who have also outgrown that level. You discover a new community, a new tribe, a new set of companions who speak your language, who understand your experience, who are wrestling with the same questions you are. This is why spiritual seekers throughout history have formed communities, monasteries, ashrams, mystery schools, philosophical circles. Not because they're elitist or exclusive, but because they needed to be with others who understood what they were experiencing, who could support them through the difficult transitions, who could remind them that they weren't crazy, that the path was real, that the struggle was worthwhile. But these communities are often hidden, or at least not obvious. They don't advertise, they don't proselytize. You find them when you're ready, when your seeking becomes sincere enough, when your loneliness becomes acute enough, and often you find them in unexpected places, a chance conversation with a stranger, a book that falls into your hands at exactly the right moment, a teacher who appears just when you need them. The key is not to cling desperately to the old relationships out of fear of being alone, but also not to cut ties prematurely out of spiritual pride. There's a middle way, as there always is. You maintain what connections you can maintain authentically. You honor your history, your roots, the people who loved you before you changed. But you don't betray yourself to preserve those connections. You don't make yourself small to make others comfortable. And sometimes, miraculously, the people around you grow too. Sometimes your own transformation becomes a catalyst for their awakening. They see something in you, a peace, a clarity, a freedom, and they want it for themselves. They start asking questions. They start opening up. And then the relationship transforms along with you, deepens, becomes more real, more honest, more alive. But you can't force this. You can't make people grow. All you can do is be yourself, be authentic, be the embodiment of what you've discovered, and trust that those who are ready will recognize it. The rest will fall away, and you must let them go with love and gratitude for what they've given you, for the role they played in your journey, even if that role has now ended. The danger of outgrowing everyone around you is real. You may lose friends, family members, communities that once defined you. You may go through periods of profound loneliness. You may question whether it was worth it. But I can tell you, from my own experience and from observing countless others on this path, that on the other side of this danger is a freedom, an authenticity, a depth of being that makes all the losses worthwhile. Because what you gain is yourself, your true self, not the self that was constructed to fit in, to please others, to meet expectations. And once you've found that, once you've tasted that freedom, you realize that you were never really losing anything real. You were only losing illusions, masks, false identities. The real connections, the real love, the real community, these remain, or they appear anew, deeper and truer than before. So if you find yourself outgrowing those around you, know that you're not alone, even in your aloneness. Know that this is part of the process, part of the path. Know that it's temporary, this loneliness, this sense of being between worlds. And know that the courage it takes to keep growing, to keep being true to what you've seen, even when it costs you everything familiar, this courage is the mark of a genuine spiritual warrior, a true seeker of truth. The caterpillar must die for the butterfly to be born. There's no way around it. But what emerges is so much more beautiful, so much more free, so much more alive than what was lost. Trust the process. Trust your growth, and trust that life, in its infinite intelligence, is guiding you exactly where you need to go, even when the path leads through darkness and uncertainty. If you have done something wrong, you have made a mistake, and somebody makes you ashamed of it and guilty, you run around licking the sores of your wounded ego because you feel your pride has been hurt. The first thing to understand is that it is not a serious failing in a human being to make mistakes. Everybody has to make mistakes. There is no way out of it. You cannot learn anything unless you make mistakes. Regard yourself as a cloud in the flesh. Clouds never make mistakes. Did you ever see a cloud that was misshapen? Did you ever see a badly designed wave? No. They always do the right thing. But if you will treat yourself for a while as a cloud or a wave and realize that you cannot make a mistake, whatever you do, because even if you do something that appears totally disastrous, it will all come out in the wash somehow or another. Then, through this capacity, you will develop a kind of confidence. And through confidence, you will be able to trust your own intuition. Don't hurry anything. Don't worry about the future. Don't worry about what progress you are making. Just be entirely content to be aware of what is. For life is not a straight road to a fixed destination. It is a current, a tide, a melody, and the so-called mistakes are nothing but changes in the rhythm, part of the dance itself. We find, for example, in Japan, a curious hang-up about making mistakes. They have studied English for years, yet rarely have the courage to speak it. For what they learned was not the living language, but the polished fragments of dead authors, and they are ashamed to try it unless they are quite out of their senses with drink. In such moments, the inhibition falls away, and they will speak freely, for the fear of saying the wrong thing has been dissolved. It is the same in music. I knew a great anthropologist who was taught the piano in just the same way I was. The schoolmarm would place a little rubber and a razor on the top of each hand so that the posture was correct, and every time he played a wrong note, she would rap him smartly with a pencil. And when confronted with the piano, in the presence of an absolutely marvelous teacher in San Francisco, she said she was amazed. He was completely incapable of reading notes. He blocked at everything. A wiser teacher once said to me, "You must not be afraid of playing wrong notes. Play them. Keep the rhythm, even if every note is wrong." This is the way to remove the blockage, the guilt, the shame. For freedom means, quite simply, the freedom to make mistakes. The freedom to be a damn fool and not to endlessly reproach yourself when you discover it was so. See it, acknowledge it, and then do it less often. The greatest mistake is to be forever fearing you will make one. For that fear is like standing at the water's edge, hesitating to enter, and so never knowing the coolness of the stream or the art of swimming. You see, the mind invents this curious tension, the notion that there must be a way to pass through life without slipping, without striking a false note. And so we become tight, hesitant, overcautious. Most live in this fashion and call it sensible. Yet it is a creeping common sense that slowly robs life of its sparkle. When you are afraid to take a chance, that is precisely the moment to take it. For fear is only the shadow cast by possibility. For what you leave undone will trouble you no less than what you did wrongly, but without the flavor of having dared. It is only those who do nothing who make no mistakes, and in doing nothing they make the most serious mistake of all. Better to stumble forward than to remain unmoving. A wrong note, kept in rhythm, still belongs to the music. A misstep, taken in stride, still moves you along the way. Life does not wait for you to be perfect before it allows you to dance. You cannot learn anything unless you make mistakes. This is how the whole game works. We come to balance only by toppling, to speech only by stumbling over our words, and to love only by losing our step in each other's arms. Life is not a straight line, but a series of beautiful stumbles that, taken together, form the dance. But the trouble is, we were brought up to think of life by analogy with a journey. A pilgrimage with a serious purpose at the end, and the whole thing was to get to that end. Success, enlightenment, heaven after you are dead. And so we miss the point the whole way along. For life is not a journey to be finished, but a musical thing, and you were meant to sing or to dance while the music is being played. In the natural world, there is no such thing as failure. A tree that bends in the wind is not incorrect. The river that shifts its course has not spoiled the plan. Nature proceeds entirely by trial, variation, and change. What you and I call mistakes are simply her way of finding out what works. And there is no need to fear what lies ahead, for the future is only a concept. It does not exist. Time is always now. When fear of the unknown is replaced with curiosity, we find ourselves in an infinite stream of possibility. Life is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be had. And the so-called mistakes are simply part of that experience. To be alive is to be unfinished. And the unfinished is always learning. Perfection is a ghost we chase and never catch. It is an image in the mind, smooth, flawless, unmoving, and because it is unmoving, it is lifeless. Nature knows nothing of it. In the whole unfolding of the seasons, in the shape of clouds and the curve of rivers, there is not one straight line, not one flawless surface, yet everything fits without strain. We are taught to imagine that somewhere there exists the right way, the perfect note, the perfect step, the perfect word, and that our task is to find it and repeat it without deviation. But this is to mistake the echo for the music. The vitality of life lies in variation, in change, in the unexpected. Without imperfection, neither you nor I would exist. It is the odd turn of the branch that catches the light, the offbeat in the rhythm that gives the music its sway. When we try to iron out every deviation, we flatten the very thing that makes life alive. And so, the idea of perfection, becomes the most imperfect idea of all. A standard that removes the color from the tapestry and the movement from the dance. When you see that there is no such thing as perfection in nature, you are freed from trying to reach it. Then you can live as the clouds do, as the waves do, moving exactly as you must, without apology. Some will say, but God never makes mistakes. God is perfect, and therefore everything He makes is perfect. And I would agree, but not in the way we usually think. For if the whole of existence is God's work, then what you call a mistake is already part of that perfection. It is only by separating the smooth from the rough in our minds that we imagine something has gone wrong. But if the rough is part of the whole, it belongs as much as the smooth. A storm is no less perfect than a calm sea. A shadow no less perfect than the light that casts it. If you see perfection in this way, it does not mean the absence of flaw. It means the completeness of the whole. And in that completeness, what we call imperfection is simply a detail in the pattern, necessary for the pattern to be what it is. So, if God is perfect, then even your missteps are already folded into that perfection, just as a wrong note, once played, becomes part of the song. Once you see that what you call imperfection is part of the whole, you can stop treating yourself as an exception to the rule. For you are not some foreign object dropped into the universe. You are as much a part of its movement as the wind in the trees and the foam on the shore. Love yourself for trying, even when the outcome is not what you hoped. A mistake is not proof of your inadequacy, but evidence that you were in motion, engaged in the game, taking part in the dance. It is the still, unmoving stone that makes no errors, but it also never lives. Forgiving yourself is often harder than forgiving someone else, because you remember every little blunder and replay it over and over. But there's no need to keep doing that. The past is done. You can't rub it out, but you can stop carrying it around. See what it showed you, take the lesson, and drop the rest. And extend this same compassion outward. At an early age, we must decide whether the mistakes of others are bigger than our love for them. Most of the bitterness in the world comes from forgetting that every one of us is fumbling along in the same human way. To love the flawed self and the flawed selves of others is not to excuse everything, but to see that nothing and no one has ever been outside the great pattern. If you've made a mistake, see it for what it is. Don't waste energy dressing it up or hiding it. That's just adding one mistake to another. The value of an error is in what it shows you. Guilt is useful for a moment. It lets you notice something is off. But after that, it's just dragging a corpse around. Learn the lesson and move on. You see, success is not in avoiding mistakes, but in not making the same one again and again. Each wrong turn points you somewhere else, and the more turns you take, the more of the map you discover. A mistake can sit on your back like a burden, or you can put it under your feet and step up on it. That's the difference between being weighed down and being lifted by experience. And when you look closely, you'll see that mistakes aren't interruptions to life. They are woven into its very fabric, each one a thread leading you to the next chapter. We rarely see it in the moment. Usually, we hate our mistakes. We replay them, curse them, wish we could undo them. But time makes it easier to see the value in it. One day, you look back and realize that wrong turn pushed you to the right path. That heartbreak cracked you open enough to see more deeply. Without those so-called disasters, you would still be standing where you were, unchanged, untested, unmoved. Every mistake was a bridge, each one linking you from the person you were to the person you could become. And without crossing those bridges, life would have simply stayed the same. Without them, there is no movement, no variation, no discovery. As in music, the wrong note in the right rhythm becomes part of the song. So go make new mistakes. Don't keep polishing the old ones. Play something else. Make glorious, ridiculous mistakes. Make the kind no one has thought of before. You see, life is not a problem you're supposed to solve. It's an experience you're supposed to have. And an experience without the unexpected is no experience at all. The sooner you make your first 1,000 mistakes, the sooner you'll know how to work with them. The more you risk the wrong note, the richer your music becomes. So go on. Try, fall, miss the step, strike the wrong